What does it take to be Secretary of State? Is the United Nations still relevant? What does it mean to be an American? Those are some hard questions, but we're fortunate enough to have someone who's more than qualified to answer them. Former Secretary of State, Dr. Madeleine Albright. She's currently chairman of the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs and the author of a much-talked-about memoir of her tenure as Secretary of State under President Clinton. Madam Secretary, it's called, and it's out on Miramax Books. Dr. Albright, welcome to the program.
Good to be with you.
My first question is sort of general. What keeps you up at night? What issues are you most concerned with?
Well, I think in this day and age, one has to be concerned with the issue of terrorism because it has clearly disrupted the regular functioning of relations among countries and how people feel about foreigners and how we protect our security. And I think we have to realize that it's not a war against terrorism because unfortunately it's going to be with us for a long time and that we have to have a united front against it.
So why now? Why did you choose this time to write the book?
Well, I decided to write my book as soon as I left office because I felt that it had been such an honor to be Secretary of State that there came an obligation with that to really write about the various things that I had been involved in because what we did was part of history, and you need to write it down. I also wanted to tell my story, which is an immigrant's and a women's story pulled together, and I wanted people to know that it was possible for an immigrant woman to become Secretary of State.
In your book, you list several women who inspired you, among them Eleanor Roosevelt, Miss Gandhi, Golda Meir, and you say they're all exceptional in all senses of the word. Why are they your heroes?
Well, because each in her own way had to make some very hard decisions about how to run her life, what issues to get involved in, what to stand up for, and had to make it in a man's world. They're very different. And, not everybody was the wife of a president or the daughter of a prime minister, or Golda Meir, who had to move to another country to become prime minister. But they are all exceptional. And one of the people that I admire tremendously, as somebody who's alive now, is Aung San Suu Kyi from Burma, who is somebody who is elected as a democratic leader and has never been able to take her position as such and has been under house arrest and harassed and really made to feel like a criminal in her own country, and I think she's quite remarkable.
Which men have influenced you the most?
Well, a lot. I obviously have to start with my father, and he was a great diplomat and a great teacher, and I was his most avid student. So obviously, as I say in the book, to understand me, you have to understand my father. But I also was very influenced by the men who kind of became my political mentors. The first one being Senator Edmund Muskie, and then Walter Mondale, Jimmy Carter, obviously President Clinton. And then there are historic men that have influenced me. Having Thomas Jefferson's job is quite inspiring. But I also have read about other secretaries of state, and the one that sticks in my mind the most is Dean Acheson.
What were the greatest challenges you faced during your tenure as Secretary of State?
Well, I think the greatest challenges we faced was trying to deal with the combination of globalization and ethnic groupings that came as a result of the end of the Cold War. During the Cold War, actually, it was dangerous but pretty simple. There were the good guys and the bad guys, and we were the good ones, and we tried very hard to influence countries to join our side. I mean, it was a really red and white world. And after the end of the Cold War, various ethnic and border conflicts that had been frozen in time began to emerge, and people were trying to settle a lot of scores. And at the same time, there was globalization, which linked us all together. So the combination of those things were what we dealt with.
We talked earlier about Czechoslovakia, and in your answer about the ideal candidate and what would it take to have the qualifications for a Secretary of State, you mentioned a passion. How much of your passion for foreign policy was influenced by the fact that you were born in Czechoslovakia and didn't attain U.S. citizenship until your college years?
I love being an American, and I was so grateful to come here and to be able to grow up free and respect what this country can do. I also grew up with a father who was a diplomat and a professor. And that's all we ever talked about. And I moved around to different schools. I would create an international relations club and make myself president and insist that people talked about foreign policy. And as I kind of moved up the chain in terms of my jobs in the government, I could see that it was possible if you cared enough to make a difference. And so some of it obviously comes from my background and where I was born and how I came to the U.S., and a lot of it has to do with what I've seen in the years along the way and the possibilities for doing something.
Throughout your career, what would you say your greatest success has been? What are you most proud of achieving?
I'm very proud of what we did during President Clinton's term, and specifically, I think, what we did on Kosovo, because there was ethnic cleansing taking place, creating huge refugee migrations. And my greatest moment, I have to say, was when I went to Pristina, the capital of Kosovo, after the end of the war, and there were huge crowds, and they held up signs chanting, "USA, thank you." So that made me feel very good, and I'm thrilled that there are quite a few little girls who have been born in Kosovo whose first name is Madeleine.
Any regrets?
Yes, a lot of regrets. You know, the Middle East peace talks that we came so close on, the negotiations with North Korea have gotten so complicated. We were in the middle of those, and they weren't followed up on. And then as UN ambassador, I regret that I didn't scream more about what was going on in Rwanda. But, you know, the truth is there's so many decisions that are made, and I think people often don't know that very rarely do you make a huge, new, bold decision. You make a lot of incremental decisions, and sometimes they lead down the right road, and occasionally you don't end up where you wanted to when you started. But, of course, there are regrets. There's so many things that one could do, and sometimes we've made mistakes, and sometimes we're not there long enough to do what we needed to.
Well, Madam Secretary, thank you for joining us today. It's been a real privilege.
Thank you so much.
That was Dr. Madeleine Albright, here exclusively on Best Practices in CSR.